Yeah.
Nightwing, Bloodhaven Noir #2, Empire of One. Rain hung over Bloodhaven like a dirty curtain, dripping from rusted fire escapes and broken neon signs. The city smelled like salt water, oil, and something rotten underneath it all. Perched on the edge of a brick rooftop was Nightwing. The wind tugged at his black and blue suit as he looked down at the street 4 stories below.
Nightwing, dumbass.
A line of black sedans sat outside a warehouse. Armed men paced around the entrance. Nightwing tapped the side of his ear. "All right," he said quietly. "Tell me you've got something for me." A calm voice came through the comm. "Of course I do," said Barbara Gordon. "Oracle, you're looking at the old dockside textile warehouse, closed about 12 years ago. Now it's being used as a meeting point for one of Bloodhaven's newest wannabe crime bosses." Nightwing smirked. "Let me guess, another guy trying to be the next blockbuster?" Barbara sighed lightly through the comm. "Not exactly." Nightwing crouched lower on the ledge. "Okay, now I'm curious." Barbara typed something on her keyboard. "The man inside calls himself Julius Caesar." Nightwing blinked. "Please tell me that's a nickname." "Nope," Barbara said. "According to GCPD files, real name Anthony Palermo, former Gotham enforcer. Took a head injury during a robbery 5 years ago." Nightwing raised an eyebrow. "And now he thinks he's the Roman emperor?" "Exactly." Nightwing glanced down at the guards again. "Bloodhaven really does attract the weird ones." Barbara chuckled faintly. "Well, you just leave Gotham City. The competition is pretty stiff." Nightwing stepped off the ledge. For a moment, he simply fell through the rain. Then his Eskrima line snapped tight around a fire escape railing. He swung silently down toward the street. 2 guards stood near the warehouse door. One of them lit a cigarette. The other barely had time to notice the shadow dropping behind them. Crack! Nightwing's Eskrima stick struck the first man across the back of the neck. The second guard turned and caught a spinning kick to the chest that sent him crashing into a stack of wooden crates. Nightwing caught both men before they could hit the ground too loudly and lowered them quietly. He tapped the comm again. "2 down." Barbara responded immediately. "Thermal scan shows at least 8 more inside." Nightwing walked toward the door. "And Caesar?" "Center office." Nightwing pushed the door open slowly. The warehouse interior was massive and dark. Hanging lights cast yellow pools across the concrete floor. Crates, tables, men with guns. Nightwing smiled beneath the mask. "Let's make an entrance." He threw a small blue disc into the center of the room. The flash grenade detonated with a bright burst of light. Gah! What the? Nightwing was already moving. His Eskrima sticks cracked across one man's wrist. Another swung a pipe. Nightwing ducked, grabbed the pipe, flipped the man over his shoulder, and dropped him hard onto the concrete. Barbara's voice stayed calm in his ear. 3 more approaching from your left." Nightwing spun. 2 men charged. He slid under the first punch and drove an elbow into the attacker's ribs before kicking the second man's legs out from under him. 1 guard fired a pistol. Nightwing rolled behind a crate as the bullet sparked against metal. "Careful," Barbara said. Nightwing grinned. "Relax, Oracle. I've had worse nights." He popped up from behind the crate and threw a pair of wingdings. The metal projectile struck the gunman's wrist and shoulder. The weapon clattered to the ground. Nightwing vaulted over the crate and finished the fight with a spinning kick that dropped the man instantly. Within seconds, the warehouse was silent. Nightwing stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by unconscious criminals. Barbara spoke again. "Office door, end of the walkway above you." Nightwing looked up. A metal staircase climbed to a small glass office overlooking the warehouse floor. Inside, a man sat in a large chair wearing a white suit with a red cape draped across his shoulders. Nightwing stared. "Please tell me that's not a toga." Barbara laughed. "Oh, it's absolutely a toga." Nightwing walked up the stairs. The office door opened before he even touched it. The man inside rose dramatically. "I knew you would come," he said proudly. Nightwing leaned against the doorframe. "Let me guess. You're Julius Caesar." The man spread his arms. "I am Caesar." Nightwing looked around the room. Roman statues, a plastic laurel crown, a golden eagle statue on the desk. "Wow," Nightwing said. "You really committed to the theme." The man stepped forward proudly. "I conquered Gotham's underworld once." Nightwing raised an eyebrow. You robbed a pawn shop. The man ignored him. Now I will build a new empire here in Bloodhaven. Nightwing sighed. Look, Caesar. He spun his Eskrima stick lazily in his hand. History spoiler. The man frowned. What? Nightwing smiled slightly. Caesar gets stabbed. The criminal roared and charged. Nightwing stepped aside easily. The man slammed into the desk. Hop. Nightwing swept his legs out from under him. The self-proclaimed emperor hit the floor hard. Nightwing pinned him with a knee and snapped handcuffs onto his wrists. At 2, Nightwing. The man groaned dramatically. Nightwing stood. Yeah. He tapped his comm. Oracle, your emperor has fallen. Barbara chuckled. Bloodhaven police are on the way. Nightwing walked to the broken window overlooking the warehouse. Red and blue lights were already flashing outside. He looked out across the dark skyline of Bloodhaven. Rain still falling. Dirty streets, corrupt towers. Barbara spoke again, softer this time. You're quiet. Nightwing crossed his arms. I was hoping Caesar might know something. About who? Nightwing didn't hesitate. Roland Desmond. Barbara was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. No new leads yet. Nightwing stared out over the city. Magpie was working for him. Someone's funding half the crime in this city. Someone big. Lightning flashed across the harbor. Nightwing's eyes narrowed. Blockbuster's out there. Barbara's voice returned in his ear. Then I guess you'll just have to keep looking. Nightwing stepped onto the fire escape. Wind whipping through the rain, he fired his grappling line into the night. I planned to. The line pulled tight and Nightwing swung out across the rooftops of Bloodhaven. Somewhere in the darkness of the city, Blockbuster was waiting. And Nightwing was getting closer.
Next one is a Tim Drake story. Then we get into the Arkham stories and a Batman story. Batman-related story. Yeah.
The Robin's Nest #1. Questions and answers. Night had settled heavily over Gotham City. The kind of cold, quiet night where the wind moved through alleyways like a whisper, and the city lights looked tired instead of bright. On the edge of a rooftop overlooking Robinson Park stood Batman. Beside him crouched Tim Drake, the newest Robin. The boy adjusted the green domino mask slightly as he studied the darkened museum across the street. So, Tim said quietly, let me guess, this isn't just a random break-in. Batman's cape shifted in the wind. No, Tim smirked faintly. Thought so? He looked down again at the Gotham City History Museum, where police lights flashed faintly at the far end of the street. Let me guess again, Tim continued. Question marks? Batman nodded once. Yes. Tim sighed. Of course it's him. Inside the museum somewhere was Edward Nygma. Tim tapped the small communicator on his collar. Oracle says the power inside the building went out about 6 minutes ago. From far away, through the comm, came the calm voice of Barbara Gordon. Correction, she said. 5 minutes and 42 seconds. Tim smiled. Hi, Barbara. Focus, Robin, she replied. Batman fired a grappling line across the street. Move. The two dark figures crossed the distance silently, landing on the museum roof. Tim crouched near the skylight and pulled out a small scanner. Society thermal readings showed 3 heat signatures inside. Batman already knew what that meant. Tim said it anyway. Riddler brought friends. He slid the glass skylight open carefully. Inside the museum lobby, green emergency lights flickered. 3 figures stood near a large glass display case. The first was tall and thin, dressed in a bright green suit covered in question marks. Edward Nygma. Standing beside him were 2 women wearing matching black and green outfits. Tim recognized them immediately. Those must be Query and Echo. Below them sat an ornate golden artifact, a Roman puzzle box. Riddler was pacing proudly in front of it. My dear assistants, he said dramatically, what is greater than God, more evil than the devil? The poor have it, the rich need it, and if you eat it, you die. Query tilted her head. Echo repeated quietly, you die. Tim whispered from above. I actually know that one. Batman glanced at him. Later. Tim grinned. Right. Batman dropped first. His boots hit the marble floor without a sound. Riddler turned immediately. Ah, he shouted. Just in time. Batman stepped forward slowly. Edward. Riddler spread his arms theatrically. Tell me, Dark Knight, did you enjoy the riddle? Behind him, Query and Echo moved into fighting stances. Tim dropped through the skylight next, landing lightly beside Batman. Riddler's grin widened. And you brought the bird. Tim folded his arms. Technically a robin. Still a bird, Riddler replied. Query suddenly lunged forward. Tim reacted instantly. He ducked her punch and flipped over her shoulder, landing behind her. Echo moved next. Her kick came fast. Tim blocked it with his forearm and countered with a staff strike that forced her backward. Batman advanced toward Riddler, but the villain already had something in his hand. A small green detonator. Careful, Riddler said. One press and the puzzle box explodes. Tim froze. Batman stopped moving. Riddler grinned wider. I do love an audience. He tapped the glass display case proudly. The artifact inside is worth millions. Tim raised an eyebrow. Then why blow it up? Riddler looked offended. Because the real prize is proving I'm smarter than Gotham's greatest detective. Echo suddenly attacked Tim again. He blocked her strike and swept her legs out from under her. Query came from the side. Tim spun his staff, striking her wrist and knocking a blade from her hand. Batman moved faster than Riddler expected. A batarang flew through the air. Clang. The detonator was knocked out of Riddler's hand. Before he could react, Batman was already in front of him. Riddler stumbled backward. Wait! Batman grabbed him by the collar and pinned him against the wall. Behind them, Tim finished the fight. Query and Echo both lay on the floor groaning. Tim twirled his staff once before collapsing it. All clear. Batman turned to Riddler. You're done. Riddler laughed nervously. Oh, please, you say that every time. Sirens echoed outside. Police cars were already arriving. Tim looked down at the puzzle box. Oh, by the way, he said casually. Riddler glared at him. What? Tim smiled. The answer to your riddle. Riddler blinked. What? Tim leaned closer. Nothing. Riddler's face turned red. You solved it? Tim shrugged. Yeah. Batman pulled Riddler toward the door as police rushed inside. Behind them, Tim followed quietly. Another Gotham criminal caught. But as the police led Edward Nygma, Query, and Echo away in handcuffs, Tim looked back at the museum. Something about the night felt unfinished. Riddler was laughing again as he was pushed into the squad car. Riddle me this, Robin, he shouted. Tim stopped. What? Riddler's grin was wide and strange. How long before Gotham's questions become answers? The police shut the car door. The sirens faded into the distance. Tim stood silently beside Batman. Batman finally spoke. Come on, Tim nodded. The two figures vanished into the dark rooftops of Gotham City. But somewhere, deep within Arkham Asylum, a cell was already waiting for the Riddler. And this would not be the last time Tim Drake faced him.
My name is Omar. In case you missed my last...
The Arkham Stories #3? Riddle me this. Opening news broadcast. The television flickers softly inside a dim office somewhere within Arkham Asylum. A Gotham news anchor speaks as footage rolls behind them. Tonight's national headlines: a joint effort between Aquaman and the mysterious heroes known as the Wonder Twins ended a violent confrontation with the oceanic criminal Ocean Master earlier today. Clips show crashing waves, a harbor battle, police boats circling. The anchor continues. In Metropolis, the city's protector, Superman, stopped another robbery attempt by the notorious gadget criminal Toyman. The footage changes again. And here in Gotham City, the vigilante known as Batman returned Edward Nygma, also known as the Riddler, to Arkham Asylum just a few days ago following a museum break-in. The broadcast continues quietly in the background as the camera view changes. Part 1, the corridor. The hallway lights buzz softly above the cold stone floors of Arkham. Footsteps echo slowly. Hugo Strange walks calmly through the corridor, hands folded behind his back. He passes a reinforced cell. Inside sits Dr. Phosphorus. The glowing figure sits on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink. He simply watches the concrete like something invisible is written there. Hugo glances briefly inside, then continues walking. Further down the hall, another cell. A massive reptilian figure grips the iron bars. Killer Croc grins with jagged teeth. Well, look who it is, Croc growls. Strange stops. Croc leans forward slowly. When I get out of here, Doctor. His voice drops to a whisper. I'm going to eat you. His claws scrape the bars. I'm going to eat your flesh. He grins wider. And your bones. Strange simply adjusts his glasses. Good evening, Mr. Jones. Then he continues walking down the hallway. Behind him, Croc laughs quietly. Part 2, Case File Notes. Arkham Asylum, Patient File. Subject Edward Nygma, alias the Riddler. Historical notes indicate the subject previously operated with 2 known accomplices. Both individuals served as assistants during multiple criminal operations involving puzzles, riddles, and elaborate theft schemes. Following the subject's most recent arrest by Batman, the accomplices were also apprehended. Current psychological profile suggests continued obsession with intellectual superiority and symbolic messaging. Recent behavior includes writing riddles across his cell walls, creating complex word puzzles with threatening themes, laughing episodes during solitary confinement. Interview recommended. Part 3, the interview. The door to a reinforced cell opens slowly. Inside sits Edward Nygma. The walls are covered in chalk writing, question marks, puzzles, half-finished riddles. Edward sits cross-legged on the floor, drawing another symbol when Hugo Strange enters. Strange folds his hands calmly. Good evening, Edward. Riddler doesn't look up. Doctor. Strange glances at the walls. You've been drawing threatening riddles again. Edward smiles faintly. What's so threatening about my riddles? Strange remains silent. Edward looks up now. Let me tell you one. He grins. Riddle me this. Strange sighs slightly. Edward's voice becomes playful. What walks on 4 legs, then 2 legs, and finally 3 legs? Strange answers almost immediately. A human being. Edward tilts his head. Strange continues calmly. As a baby, it crawls on 4 legs. As it grows older, it walks on 2. And give it a few years. It uses a cane. Edward stares at him, then begins giggling. Good try. Strange frowns slightly. Edward leans closer. But the answer to all 3 is a baby. Strange blinks. Edward's grin widens. True, a baby crawls on 4 legs. He raises 2 fingers. But cut off 2 of them. It can only wiggle around on 2 legs. He raises a 3rd finger. And give it a crutch. It can hobble around on 3. Silence fills the room. Strange looks genuinely disturbed. That's horrible, Edward. He shakes his head. How can you make a joke about that? Edward leans back against the wall, laughing softly. Because, Doctor. His smile becomes razor thin. It's not my baby. Strange adjusts his glasses slowly. Edward suddenly sits up again. Oh, one more. Strange sighs. Edward's eyes gleam. Riddle me this. Strange says nothing. Edward spreads his arms dramatically. Why does nobody know what's going on at Arkham? Strange stares at him. Edward whispers the answer with a grin. Because the answer is Strange. The room goes completely silent. Strange stands still. Edward's laughter echoes around the padded walls of the cell. And somewhere deep within Arkham Asylum, the riddles continue.
Something is moving in my car right now.
The Arkham Stories #4, Riddle Me This Again. Part 1, Case File 1, Origins. Arkham Asylum Psychological File. Subject, Edward Nygma, alias, the Riddler. Edward Nashton was born into a deeply unstable home environment in Gotham City. Records suggest his mother was largely absent during his childhood, frequently leaving home for extended nights and social outings. His father, meanwhile, displayed a pattern of abusive and controlling behavior. As a young boy, Edward developed a fascination with puzzles and intellectual challenges. One early incident appears to have shaped his life dramatically. While attending school, Edward discovered an upcoming puzzle-solving competition. Determined to win, he secretly broke into the school building during the night and practiced the puzzle repeatedly until he could complete it flawlessly. The following day, Edward won the contest and was awarded a book of riddles. This event became a defining moment in his life. Edward displayed extraordinary intelligence throughout his youth. He passed examinations with remarkable ease, often outperforming his peers. However, his father refused to believe in Edward's natural intellect. Instead, he accused Edward of cheating. In at least one documented incident, his father claimed to have caught him cheating and responded by beating him severely. The abuse continued throughout Edward's childhood. From this environment, Edward developed a compulsive psychological need. He felt an overwhelming urge to prove he was telling the truth. His fascination with riddles and puzzles evolved from this need. Riddles, in Edward's mind, represented truth hidden within logic. Unfortunately, the prolonged abuse also contributed to the psychological instability that would later drive him toward criminal behavior. Part 2, Interview Transcript. Number 1, Interviewer, Hugo Strange, subject, Edward Nygma. The tape recorder clicks on. Strange sits across from Edward in a small interview room inside Arkham Asylum. Edward lounges in his chair casually, hands folded. Strange speaks first. Edward, I'd like to ask you about your childhood. Edward smiles faintly. My home life? Strange nods. Yes. Edward leans back. My mother wasn't really around. He shrugs. You see, she was, well, Edward smirks, a whore. Strange says nothing. Edward continues. She was always out partying at clubs, drinking, dancing, doing whatever it was she did. He looks at the ceiling. That meant I stayed home with father. His voice becomes colder. He didn't like me very much. Strange asks quietly, what happened? Edward answers simply, he abused me. Silence fills the room. Edward taps the table lightly. He would beat me. Strange frowns. That's horrible. Edward tilts his head. That's not even the worst part. Strange watches him carefully. Edward continues. He was also my school principal. Strange's eyes narrow slightly. Edward grins. So when I won that riddle competition, he taps the table again. He swore I cheated. Strange shakes his head. That's horrible. Edward laughs. He's right. Strange blinks. Edward shrugs. I did cheat. He leans forward, but that experience made me curious. Strange listens closely. Edward smiles wider. I wanted to understand riddles, to study them, to master them. He taps his temple. Once you know the answer to every question, you control the game. Part 3, Case File Notes number 2. As Edward grew older, he eventually left home. For a time, he disappeared from official Gotham records. The next confirmed reports place him working at a traveling carnival. Edward used his intellect and puzzle-solving abilities to perform games of chance and mental challenges for carnival goers. However, many accounts indicate he was secretly cheating participants out of their money. While this activity proved profitable, it was not intellectually stimulating enough for Edward. He desired something greater. Eventually, Edward reinvented himself. He adopted a new identity, the Riddler. At the same time, he legally altered his name to Edward Nygma, spelled Enigma. His criminal career escalated rapidly. Initially, Edward worked as an informant and criminal profiler for elements of Gotham's underworld. On occasion, he even provided information to Batman himself. But Edward's fascination with the vigilante soon evolved into rivalry. He began designing elaborate puzzles and crimes specifically meant to challenge Batman's intellect. What began as a game eventually turned into a full criminal career. The Riddler became one of Batman's most persistent adversaries. His crimes are rarely about profit. Instead, they are meant to prove a single idea. Edward Nygma believes himself to be the smartest man in Gotham. Part 4, Interview Transcript. Number 2, Strange turns another page in his notes. Edward, I'd like to ask about your time working at the carnival. Edward rolls his eyes. Boring. Strange raises an eyebrow. Boring? Edward nods. You can convince those fools they lost even if they know you cheated. He shrugs. They still pay. Strange studies him carefully. What about Batman? Edward looks up. My obsession? Strange nods. Yes. Edward laughs suddenly. Obsession? He leans back again. You must have me confused with the clown, Hugo. Strange says nothing. Edward smirks. I wouldn't blame you. He gestures around the room. You have hundreds of inmates in this place. He points toward the hallway. I just wish I wasn't next to that sewer-smelling crocodile man who eats his own feces. In the distance, faintly, the roar of Killer Croc echoes through the corridor. Strange ignores it. Edward continues. But to answer your question, he folds his hands together. I thought Batman and I wanted the same thing. Strange tilts his head. What do you mean? Edward's voice lowers slightly. To expose the corruption of the city. He smiles faintly, but then one night, his eyes darken. I was hired by Hot Black Mask. Strange writes something down. Edward continues. He paid me to gather blackmail on powerful people. Strange looks up. And? Edward laughs softly. That's when I learned I was wrong. Strange asks. About Batman? Edward nods slowly. Yes. He leans forward. You see, Doctor? I thought we were playing the same game. Strange remains silent, but he tried to take me down. Strange asks, what were you doing at the time? Edward shrugs. Oh, nothing important. He grins. I was just working on the Gotham City Police Department criminal database team. Strange pauses. Edward's grin widens. But I got away. He leans back in the chair, as I always used to do back then. The recorder continues running, and somewhere in Arkham's silent halls, another riddle is waiting.